Hi, this is Barb Crowley, and welcome to Metaphysics, A View Through the Veil. Today we have Dave Gaggin on with us. He received a BA in mathematics and a BS and master's degrees in electrical engineering, which led him to a high-powered, fulfilling, and successful career. But he still spent his spare time plagued by the most basic questions of who am I, where am I, and why am I here? After a lifetime of study, a consistent pattern of wisdom began to emerge and separate itself from the rest. It was a world of metaphysics, and that is what we're going to talk about today. Welcome to the show, Dave. I'm so glad to have you here on this subject in this conversation.
Thank you, Barb. Thank you for having me.
So the first question is, what is metaphysics?
Metaphysics, meta means beyond, and physics, of course, is the world that science looks at. So it's really looking at beyond the physical world. So metaphysics includes really everything that you can think of. It includes religion, obviously science. It includes ESP, paranormal phenomena, anything that you can think of is a candidate to be thrown into the metaphysics pot and thought about. I think of metaphysics as spirituality, and spirituality. A lot of people look at it and they say, "Well, that's religion." Well, not to me, it isn't. Spirituality is we are spirits having a life experience. Therefore, everything that we do and function with is spiritual. And metaphysics covers all of that.
Mm-hmm. And you had one foot in science, and then that couldn't answer your questions, is what it looks like to me.
Well, that's exactly
pushed you
right.
into the bigger world.
It did. I looked at it all. I started out in science, but science wasn't getting it done for me. And I studied quantum mechanics and relativity and all that stuff. And very interesting. I liked it. But my dad, when I was a kid, in high school, my dad would give me these books. He'd read them. He'd read things like Velikovsky's World and Collision, and he'd say, "What do you think of this?" So I'm 14 years old, and I'm reading this thing, and I'm going, "Good grief, what is this all about?" And he'd give me things on Aku Aku, which is Easter Island, and the pyramids, and and I'm thinking, what in the world is going on? So he kind of got me into looking at things, and that's kind of the way I spent my life, is trying to figure out, what's going on. And
Yeah.
so I searched religions. I read, and I found that the farther back you went into religion, whether it be Christianity or Hinduism or Buddhism or whatever, the more similar the religions were. They got separated and became different over time, but the early teachings were very, very similar. You take Krishna and Christ and Buddha, their teachings were very, very similar. It's just you wouldn't recognize that with the religions that you have today, because it's all the differences that people keep trying to point out that makes the religions different, because that's what the people that are running the religion want. They want to separate themselves so that the people will come and be in their church, or
Right. I always found that religion
had
to have. I always found that a religion had to have an other, almost an enemy.
Yeah, you're right.
So that they could be separate and have their own tribe.
Yeah.
But when you went back to all of them, you found them similar. What was similar? What were the basics that you found?
Well, I think that they were based on love. They were based on that we're all the same. We're all equal. We're all spirits having a life experience. There's just the basis of of how to live your life. Beliefs and expectations are what it's all about. And you need to take care of other people, and and be good and kind to other people. And just the basics of life are were the same things that Krishna said and Jesus said. In some of the old books, the Bhagavad Gita. I don't know if you've ever read that. That's the old Hindu text. It's a
I do
fabulous
know
text.
of the book, but I haven't read it.
Okay, it gives you basically it says the same things as Jesus said and the same things as Buddha said. So, it's just the early religions, they all believed in reincarnation. Um, uh, you know, and now it's mostly the Eastern religions do, but Christianity and Judaism, I mean, for the first 500 years, they all believed in reincarnation.
Mhm.
So, so a lot of the beliefs are very, 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 very similar. It's just that you wouldn't know it today.
As we pulled away from those beliefs, um, what did it do to us? I know, let's say I was brought up Catholic, so I know with the Catholic, as they pulled away from reincarnation, I knew they sat in a meeting and said, we don't have control over these people because they keep saying they'll do it next time. Oh, yeah, I'll do that next time.
Yeah.
And so they got rid of reincarnation. That's my belief.
Well,
But,
I agree with you 100%. Yeah, yeah, and they
yeah,
did
to
it.
get
That
control.
Yeah, they did it about 450 AD. And I forget who was it at the time who made that decision, and he called everybody together, all the bishops together, and they sat down and decided that no, we need to not give people a second chance. We're gonna use fear to control these
Yeah.
people, and that's really what it did. It added a huge amount of fear to everybody, and
Yeah.
everybody that believed in that religion.
Hmm. Is that true of all religions or just like I talked about Catholic or Christianity?
No, I think I think it's universal. That's how you control people. You control people through
Right.
fear, and that's what they tried to do. Buddhism was a reformation of Hinduism. Hinduism, just like Christianity, is a reformation from Judaism. Buddha came down and he said, "Hey, this isn't working. This isn't right." And so he tried to get them all back on an even keel, and that's just what Jesus did. He came down and he tried to get everybody back in line and saying, "Hey, and it's funny with Jesus, he comes down and everybody says, yeah, he was mad at the temples. Let's tear down the temple. So what they do? They put up a church, put up a temple, called it a church, just changed the
Yeah.
name, and there you are. And that's exactly what he didn't want you to do, but they did it
Hmm.
anyway. So that's kind of the nature of the beast.
When you say they came down, where did they come from?
These were entities that had been on this planet before, and they were very advanced, and they moved on. And there are 7 fields of creation, if you will, in our universe, and one of them is the physical plane, and then the other is the astral plane, or a other is an astral plane, and that's where you go when you die. You simply move into the astral plane, and then you go back and forth between the astral plane and the physical plane when you're reincarnating. So when you go back and forth, after a while, you've completed all your physical reincarnations, and then you move on to the causal plane. In other words, you and the other people that you're working with, when everybody completes it as an entity, they move on to the causal plane. And then after the causal plane, they move on to the mental plane. So you go through this cycle for all the fields of creation. And then there's a messianic plane, and that's the one that Jesus came from. And he had advanced to that point, and he came down and tried to teach from that level. And then the Buddhaic plane is the last one, and that's where Buddha taught from. So that's where they came from. They were very high level spirits that had moved on and knew a great deal and came down to try to help mankind. So that's where they came from, the spiritual world. But that's where everything comes from, isn't it? The spiritual world. But they came from a certain place in the spiritual world. I don't know where Krishna came from, quite frankly.
And are we like the lowest level? Or
No, we're
as
not
you
even
said, we
we're
go
not
back
even
and forth
close to the
between
lowest level. No, no. We with the the other thing is that what is not realized all that often is that there's only one thing that exists, and that's conscious energy. And that conscious energy grows and evolves over time. So everything that exists is conscious energy. But some conscious energy is a lot less conscious than other conscious energy. For example, an atom is conscious energy, but its consciousness is way below what you and I are. Well, at one time, that was our level of consciousness. So we've come a long way. We've come through the mineral, we've come through the plants, we've come through the lower level animals, and now here's where we are, which is in a sentient soul, which is, I don't know, halfway up. I don't know if it's halfway, but we've been doing this for hundreds of millions of years, probably hundreds of billions of years. And there's other beings that are way, way above us. And that would be the Tao or, other higher level spirits. And they're the ones that are helping us and guiding us. So there's a huge disparity between the lower level, very low level, and the very high level. But we're all evolving. Everything, all of conscious energy is evolving, and we're just part of that. So no, we've come a long way. We just have a long way to go, but then we have forever to do it, right? It's eternal.
Do we start from nothing, or where's our
No,
beginning? Where's
you
consciousness beginning?
consciousness begins when the dormant energy becomes active. And the dormant energy is, to best of my knowledge, I can't guarantee it, but I think it's infinite. Now, it may not be, but if it isn't infinite, it's close. And something has to spark that energy. Now, once one spark has become active, then it sparks another piece of the dormant energy, and another and another. So it keeps going. So dormant energy now, there's a huge amount of energy out there, as anybody could see. All I got to do is look at the physical world and imagine how much energy is there. So we've all come from this initial spark, and that initial spark has grown into, you can call them God if you want, or the Tao, or universal consciousness, or all that is. There's, you can call it anything you want, but that's where we come from. We come from a piece of dormant energy that has been activated and then evolved.
And can we slide backwards
No,
as we
no.
evolve? Can we
There
kind of
is
devolve?
no. And that's where Hinduism is. That's the fear that Hinduism likes to put in, right? They say, well, if you're not good and you don't, you aren't nice to the upper class, the upper caste system, then you'll come back as a bull, or you'll come back as a donkey, or you'll come. Well, that's nonsense.
Yeah.
You reach a certain level and you can't go back, because you've evolved to a certain level. We have evolved to a sentient soul, and therefore we're not going back.
In spite of what they say, huh?
In spite, yeah, forget it.
Yeah.
It's just that's a way of controlling their people. That's all.
So do you believe most religions are control? I have to admit, I do believe that most
Absolutely.
religions have left their
Yeah.
the basic belief or the basic concept and have become a man-made, woman-made, whatever, human-made control.
Yeah.
entity
I
at
think
this
that I
point.
think that's absolutely true. I think Buddhism is probably the best. I'm
Mhm.
not a Buddhist, and I still and I don't believe in some of their things. But if you look at it, from a broader perspective, it's probably the best of what's going on in religion today. But you're better off. Religion has a place, but what religion needs to do, it needs to say, hey, I don't have all the answers, but we need to search for them together. And we need, as a group, to see if we can figure out what's going on here. And until they do that, they're going to start losing more and more and more people, because
Mhm.
people look at it. And I mean, I remember when I was 15 years old, and I was brought up an Episcopalian, and I remember sitting in church in the pews and looking at the stained glass windows and the priest in all his fancy garb and all of this stuff. And I thought to myself, I don't know what the answer is, but this isn't it.
Right. I had the same thought actually, and around the same time. But mine was based on a child could be born with physical challenges or, something. And why him and not me? And of course, according to the Catholic Church, well, he did something bad.
Yeah, right.
And this is
It's
a baby born. Where could he have done something bad? Yeah.
right. Because they
So,
don't allow reincarnation, right? So
right,
so now they're really
exactly.
stuck.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
yeah, so
yes.
but the interesting thing is, we choose these problems that we are born with. They aren't thrown on us. We choose them, and everything that we have in our life we chose. And
Mhm.
now some of it can be karmic, right? So you might say, okay, that's a tough life. Well, some of these lives are tough lives, but they've made their choice that they want to have a tough life. And if it's karmic, then they have to learn from the experience, not being punished. They have to learn from the experience. But if you're very low level, and I'm talking relative to humanity, if you are inexperienced, you're a young soul, then you might have a hard life because you've made some, you've done some things that, you're paying back for and learning from. Or you could be a very advanced soul that says, I want to experience that. I want to experience what it's like to be, to have this difficult life. So, most of the people that are, having normal lives like you and I are more in the middle. But the very advanced souls can come back in very difficult situations from our perspective. And the younger souls can cause themselves to, have difficult lives while they're learning and evolving.
What do you think karma is then? If it's not a punishment kind of system.
No, no, no. It's a learning tool. Karma is if you end up interfering with somebody's life. We do, and pre-life planning, and we do a lot of things to get prepared for our life, and then we put a lot of energy into it, and then we go and we get born and we grow up. We go to a certain extent. We've put a lot of energy in, and if somebody comes along and prevents us from executing our life plan, then they owe us that energy. And what it boils down to is us learning through that, because we've done something foolish that prevented somebody else from having their life or executing their life the way they wanted to execute it. And therefore, they have to, you owe them, what you take away from them. So it's a learning tool. It's absolutely not a punishment. There is no such thing as a punishment. When we go through a life and we have a bad life, and then we die. We had all these plans to do things, and nobody was ever planned to be a terrorist or a criminal or a murderer. That's when we've gotten off track. But when you die and you go there, and Nobody says, you know, you know, you screwed up big time, and you don't get any attaboys if you did real well. They just say, okay, here's where you are now. Now let's move on from here, for better or for worse. You're trying to be evolved, and we're going to try to help you evolve. So if you need to learn certain things, fine, we'll set that up for you, to learn. So it's strictly a, this is what you did in life, and there we go. I don't know if you've noticed, but a lot of these terrorists and criminals and such, they die young. And there's not an accident. That's not an accident. They die young.
I say you don't ever see an old terrorist.
No, you don't. And what's happening is the soul is saying, "Hey, we we got to move on. We're racking up some karma that I'm going to have to deal with." And so, I mean, when you're born and when you put your pre-life plan together, one of the things that you decide is when you're going to die. So when you're going to be born. You also know when you're going to die. Now, so they're called exit points. So it depends on what life you choose, because we have multiple lives that we choose, multiple types of lives, multiple experiences that we could go through. We pick our parents, we pick our spouses. Well, the parents that you pick might not have any kids. We got free will, so you got to pick multiple parents. And each one would be a different set of experiences. The spouse may, the spouse that you might have planned to marry or live with or whatever, they may have found somebody else. So you have all these options that you have, and each option, there's a different exit point. So depending on what you've chosen in life, and then if life goes terribly wrong, like we're talking about criminals and terrorists, right, then the soul can step in and say, "Hey, wait a minute, we're not getting this right." So there's that, so we have all these options that we don't think of. We don't realize that we have these options.
So before we come in, we do a plan. But is it us doing a plan, or is it others that are planning for us?
Oh, it's us, like, but you have to understand. Yeah, you must understand who us is. Us is our soul, and our soul is much greater than this ego that you and I are aware of, that you and I think are an I. Well, that's the I that we have here on this planet, but it's not the I, the real I, which is the soul. So the soul creates the personality. So what the soul does is the soul says, okay, these are the experiences that I want in this next life. And then it says, all right, let's try to create a personality that will give us those experiences. So for example, the soul wants to see things from all different angles. So it might say, and to use the common terms that we see in the newspaper every day, might say, I want to be a conservative this time and look at all the problems from a conservative perspective. Because last time I was a liberal, and I saw them from that side. And if I wasn't a liberal last time, then it'd probably be a liberal next time. In other words, and I'm just using this as an example, it can be religious and secular, it can be all these things. But the spirit, the soul wants to have multiple experiences, and they may not be life after life. The life that I'm living, so Michael tells me, the last one that had the most effect on this life was 500 years ago, when my youngest daughter and I were professors in a Hungarian university. And that, at the time, she was teaching math, which she says, math, I don't even do math, these days. But, and I was teaching something like sociology or something. And I knew at the time that what I was teaching people was wrong, but I didn't know what was right. And now in this life, I've been able to come back and see what this life is all about. And I explain all of these things that we're talking about in Our Eternal Existence, which is the new book, a metaphysical perspective
Your new
of reality.
Book, yeah. And we'll go over, where we can get that. And, all of that
Okay.
to make
Right.
sure that everybody knows your
Right.
new book and where to get it, because your new book is chock full. It's fascinating. Um, but I wanted to ask too, can we choose to come back as a criminal or as a terrorist to see it from that side, where it's not that we got lost, but we're perfectly on plan?
You
Do you
could.
know what I mean?
You could. You can
Yeah.
choose anything you want, but you got to be very careful that you're not racking up um, karma. So what you would do is you would come back and say, okay, I'll be a terrorist, and I will have certain people that that owe me so and so because what they've done to me in the past, and I will deal with just them. I think it would be a very unusual set of circumstances to do that, extremely unusual. But we can do anything we want. We have free will, and I think that would be a dangerous course to take because you could go way wrong. Being a terrorist, or you could make a lot of mistakes, and I've never seen anything anywhere that anybody has chosen that path, but you can choose any path you want.
Um, because that to me would be a totally different view.
Oh, that's a
Yeah,
different view, all right. That's a
yeah,
different view.
yeah.
That's got a huge amount of aggression in it, and it's one thing to have the terrorists are generally have some belief, some religious belief that they've bought into, and so and then and a lot of people have these type of beliefs, but they don't have the aggression to go with it. It's when you
Mhm.
have these extremely strong beliefs and you have this aggression, and greed is, obviously part of it. You have a lot of characteristics that would lead you to do some of these things that, really, we're going to be a real problem for you that to have to deal with in future lives.
Yeah. And choosing to be born to parents who have these kind of beliefs. Why would anybody choose to do that? Because you're putting yourself in a dangerous situation if and
You
kids
are.
do imprint their parents' belief,
Yes, they
so
do. Yeah. Yeah.
you're putting yourself into a dangerous situation by even being born. And why would
To them.
everybody not just be born rich and easy and a perfect life?
Because they want to experience other things. And just because
Mhm.
you're a terrorist kid doesn't make you a terrorist. It
Yeah.
might make it difficult for you, but other things make it difficult for you too. So some of these terrorists, weren't necessarily born to terrorist, you know, parents.
Mhm.
They just have other
No, I know.
energies in them that allow them to go and act in certain ways.
Um, when you come into the world, it's one soul, one body. But does that ever change? Is there ever any multiple souls in one body? And
Each
what is
body,
mental illness, I
each
guess?
each okay, well, that's another question. Let me go back
Yeah,
to
I know.
this last one
Sorry
is, and
about that. Yeah.
it's
Too many
challenging enough.
rabbit holes. Yeah.
What we come in with is we come in with our conscious is divided into three different focuses, and one of the focuses is what I call in the book, in our eternal existence, I call it the ego. And the ego is focused on the physical world. But there's a number of different neurological consciousnesses within our our personality. And the ego is the one that is dominant right now. But the ego that was dominant when you were a child may not, and probably is not, the ego that's running you right now. And when you're in your middle of your business world, which I was for a while, I probably had a different ego running that particular control, running the business world, than I probably have now. Now, you can't tell the difference. I can't. So within you, there are many, many different psychological entities. And all your past lives are in your subconscious, which is the second one, right? We got the ego, we got the subconscious. The subconscious is one big function, is to run your body. And we all know that, and science will agree with that. But then there's the other thing that the subconscious has that science is struggling to understand, is that's where all your past life egos are. So within you, you have these subordinate, and they're subordinate for this life, not necessarily for every life. And they obviously weren't subordinate when they were running a past life. And so you have these within you. So within you is a very, very complex psychological structure that you don't see and you don't recognize. So are these different people? No, it's you. You just are much more complicated than you think you are. And then the third part is the soul, and that's really the real I. See, the ego is the I you think is you, and then the soul is your real I. When you die, there is a survival personality, okay? And the survival personality it goes back into the dominant soul, and therefore it still functions, it still does what it wants to do, and it still evolves on its own, but it's working as a team member with the other psychological entities that are in your soul, in your psychological makeup. So the question that you asked me is very difficult to answer, because, are there multiple lives? Yeah. And a soul can create more than one personality at a time. If you have a very developed soul, you might set up multiple personalities on the same planet at the same time, or may not even be the same planet. It may be somewhere else in some other reality. So the souls are capable of doing that.
Is that what's called parallel lives?
I mean, you could call it parallel lives. I don't call that parallel lives, but parallel lives are what is just, well, parallel lives are a hard thing to define. I don't really have a good
I don't understand it. That's why I'm asking you.
Yeah, well, it doesn't fall in the realm of these things. It can mean many things to many people.
So we do just not incarnate here, but we can incarnate on different planets and have different experiences.
Without a doubt, both of my children, Michael says, started out on a different planet, and then that planet on their first incarnation in this cycle, a physical incarnation, and that planet became uninhabitable for sentient beings, for the experience that their soul wanted them to have. So they, as a group, as a large group, after a life or two, decided to move on to another planet, and they came here. So yeah, and you do these cycles, and as I said, we cycle through all of these fields of creation, right? The 7 fields of creation. Then we go back into the Tao, and then we go do it again if we want. And one cycle through is a grand cycle, defined as a grand cycle. And as you go through more times, you'd never pick the same planet to come back to. Even if you wanted to be a sentient being, you wouldn't come back to Earth. You come back to Earth for our reincarnations in this physical cycle, and there might be 50, 100 of them. But after you transfer through the causal and the mental and the messianic, etc. planes, and then you go back to the Tao, you might say, gee, I'd like to have another sentient experience. But, your soul and your spirit would never say, well, let's go back to Earth. It wouldn't happen. They'd go to another planet. So
Or
they
a
can get
larger
more
experience
experience
or a
there.
different,
For a
yeah,
different experience.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
just different. Yeah.
One thing you did mention Michael twice, and we talked about Michael and Seth before we got on the radio, actually. When you did your research and you investigated all the belief systems and religion and all of that, but you also went to some channelers. You want to tell us about that part?
Yeah, channeling is interesting. Some people are capable of talking to people in uh, uh, um, other physical fields, and when somebody dies, and if you want to talk to them, they're almost assuredly in the astral field, and that's where you go through, just medium of some sort that you could do. But there are beings, and they're groups. They're called entities, and there's like 1,000 souls in them. And they moved together, and they came here together, and they worked with each other, on life after life. And then
Is that
they
what people
moved
call
on.
soul families?
Yeah,
Where people say, "Is that my
yeah,
soul family?"
yeah.
Yeah.
And your soul family would be an entity of 1,000 souls. Now, you may have some smaller soul families, but and might have bigger soul families, because as there are multiple entities would get together, and by the time you get out to the mental field, the messianic field, you've got a bunch of these different entities together. So so what so Michael and Seth are entities that are in the causal field, and the causal field spends a lot of time trying to educate humanity, and that's why these entities are. There's so many of them that will work through channels to bring the information to us, and they've been doing this for the beginning of mankind. And Shepherd Hoodwin, who wrote the foreword in Our Eternal Existence, he was the channel for Michael, and a fascinating guy. And it was, I've had a lot of different sessions with him, and it was, he used to say, "Hey, Dave, I love your sessions because everybody wants to talk about themselves when they come to Michael, but you want to talk about how the world works." And he says, I don't have that experience very often. So anyway, yeah, that's what these channels are. Now you can channel other things, but basically it's you being able to tie yourself psychologically into another entity, and that entity will be able to use you, usually your mouth, but can be automatic writing and such like that. And they'll get that information. You get that information from them, and you can ask them questions on anything, and they'll give you the answers. You can ask for short or long answers. You want the long answer? You want the short answer? Well, I usually go for the short answer because I had so many answers, so many questions that I'd like the shorter answer, so I get more questions in. But yeah, that's basically what channeling is. And Seth is the same thing. He channeled through Jane Roberts about 50 years ago. There are other people that that say that they're channeling Seth right now. I don't know if they are or aren't, but that's what they say. A lot of people out there that channel.
In your research, did you run into channels that you really kind of didn't believe them or worried about? Is this
I've run
truth?
in I've run into people that I question whether they had it right or not. And I'll tell you, if you want to find somebody, if channelings are channel is a more difficult task. A lot of people, they're just trying to figure out is what happens at death. And if you've lived for very long, and you don't have to live that long, and you had a relationship with somebody that died. I mean, a close relationship. It might be a spouse, it might be a parent, it might be a child, it might be a close friend, but somebody that you really understand and know. If you go to a medium and you ask that medium, all you tell them is your name, the name of the, and your relationship with the individual that you want to contact. And the individual will show up. If this is a real medium, the individual will show up. And they will tell that medium things that that medium couldn't possibly know that you know. Now, if you were trying to talk to George Washington, you're dead meat, because there's nothing that that you know with George Washington that somebody couldn't convince you of. But if it's your spouse or your parent, they'll say things that they know only you and they know, and the medium couldn't know. And if this medium cannot produce that type of information, move on to another medium. So you can, it's very easy to determine if they can or if they can't. But you got to just sit there and you got to just listen. And you can't give them signs. You can't say, oh yeah, that's good. Oh yeah, just got to sit there, with a flat face, listening to what they say. But only you can be convinced. Only you can be convinced who that person is that they're talking to. But they want to come. I mean, it's very easy for me to, talk to my wife who died 6 years ago. I know it's her because there are things that she and I knew that and talked about that nobody else would know. So it's very easy. And then Dad shows up at one of them. My parents showed up, and he said things that only he would know. The medium didn't even know he was going to show up. And then he'd say things that, so it's very easy to convince yourself that there's life after death. That's a piece of cake. But most people, not most people, a lot of people, they get the attitude, they say, hey, you can't know. Well, if you're convinced you can't know, then you can't know. Other people can know, but you can't know. If you're convinced you can't know, believe me, you won't know. But if you're open-minded and say, hey, I'm going to go see if I can, prove to myself, because only you can educate yourself. This is it. My book, Our Eternal Existence, it gives you all the places to go and to look for spiritual ideas, but only you can do it. You have to, it's a personal journey. Evolution is a personal journey. So you can get all these good ideas and such, but if you don't take the journey, then you're not going to evolve at that period of time and in that way. I mean, you'll evolve eventually, but and not that you won't evolve in other ways. I mean, our life is full of things that we learn. But if you want to learn spiritual stuff, you have to take it upon yourself to do it. Nobody else can do it for you.
If you're not on that quest in this lifetime, is it because you're not evolved, or because in this lifetime you chose not to look at that, or both?
I think as you get more, as your soul gets older, which happens, life after life, personality after personality, as it gets to the old age stage, it starts having more of an interest in that type of thing. I think the very young souls, really, they're fascinated with the physical world. And so there's 5 different ages that we go through here on in the physical plane. There's the infant, there's the baby, there's the young, there's the mature, and there's the old. And then once and each one of them has 7 different levels in it. So you start at level 1 for each one of your things, and you work your way through to 7. And it usually takes you at least one life to move on from one to the other. It can take you more, and it often does, but you evolve and you move on. So I find that most of the people that I come in contact with that are very interested in this stuff have had multiple grand cycles and have had are well into the the number of soul, the personalities that the soul has created in this life. But you might not. I mean, you could be an older soul and say, hey, I want to focus on something else, and I don't care about this stuff in this life. But I think the more natural thing is, the older the soul, the more you're interested in what's going on. How's all this work?
How is it that some people can connect to the other side or can connect to, let's say, their psychic abilities or whatever, and then others can't? Is that part of their development where they are, or could it be anywhere?
Yeah, we have our 5 outer senses, right, that everybody knows about, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then we also have an inner sense. And the inner sense is fascinating, but it's usually hidden from us because it gets buried by all the outer sense data. Well, those inner senses, like telepathy, is one of the big parts of the inner sense, and that's how these people are communicating. When a medium comes and they get information from a dearly departed, they're getting it through telemetry or telepathy, and that telepathy is that's a sense that you can develop and strengthen. Some people come to this planet, and they're usually the more evolved souls, and from the more evolved souls, and their personality has got that particular sense more developed. So that's all they're doing, is they're using their telepathic inner sense, and some can use it better than others. And you can work on it. You can make it, more and more, strengthen it. Everybody can. Mm-hmm. You got to get into a pretty good trance, to do it, to get it kicked off and started. But you can, you can learn to do it, and you can certainly expand your capabilities, in this area. But that's what they're doing. They're just working with their inner sense.
Now, we talked about this a little bit before. You chose to research rather than develop your I don't want to call it inner knowing, because as you researched, you knew it. Something inside of you knew this to be true. But you didn't develop your own ability to channel or to be a medium or to any of those things.
That's very true. I chose the other path because it just seemed to be, part of, what I plan to do in this life. So, mm-hmm. You pick a certain path and you follow what it was. So, I wanted to look and see how it all worked. And I mean, I used all those other paths. I just never spent the time developing them myself.
One thing I want to ask, and I've asked myself this, is the telepathy for a medium. How do you know it's not telepathy from you versus from the other side?
I'm not sure I understand that question.
Okay, so let's say
from the other side. It is. Yeah, the other side's telling you, and you're, you can think your question. A medium doesn't have to speak it; they can think it, just like they're getting their information, and they're actually some of them. I mean, they a good medium can actually see, these other spirits. They don't see them as clear as you and I see the physical world, but they can, they can see it through their inner senses. When you die, right, you can still see, but you don't have your eyes, right? But you can still see because your inner sense allows you to do that. See, smell, touch.
As you go through these cycles, can you get lost? Can you kind of just get lost and wander, I guess? Or
number one, no, you can't. But which cycle are you referring to? Because I've talked about the
cycles, I guess. The
grand cycle.
Yeah.
You can't get lost in a grand cycle. You can't get lost. You can't get lost anywhere. Believe me, you can't get lost anywhere. You can get stuck in a few places. Apparitions, ghosts, Those are basically people that have died and their physical body died, but their consciousness, there's a big chunk of their consciousness that couldn't let go of the physical field. What you have to do is you have to stop focusing on the physical field and focus on the astral field. But some individuals, could be animals too, in certain cases, are so focused on the physical field, and they feel they have things to do, that they might feel responsible for somebody else. They might feel that they didn't complete the karma that they came for. Whatever it is, they're so enamored and tied in to the physical field, they can't let go. So part of them goes, part of their consciousness goes, but some of it stays and stays focused on the physical field. They can't do anything. You can't touch, you can touch something, but your hand goes right through it. So you can get yourself slightly delayed, but sooner or later, you move on. The spiritual world helps you get through it. You transfer.
How about evil entities? There's some real evil, it seems like, in the world.
Evil doesn't exist. Ignorance, there's some staggeringly ignorant consciousness out there. But evil is something that, can't be corrected, right? Evil is something that's bad through and through, and there's no consciousness that is like that. So evil doesn't exist. It just massive ignorance. And, they're so ignorant they appear evil, but they do some really foolish things. But no, there are no evil entities, not truly evil.
At any point, do we complete all of this? And if we do, what happens? Where do we go then?
Well, you complete it to a certain extent, right? You have eternity to, you keep learning forever. But you might say, and you will say at a certain point, I'm done with these sentient lives. I want to go do something else. So you might, next time around, next grand cycle, you might say, hey, I'm going to go, learn how to operate a star. So, or, I'm going to go be a planet somewhere and such, and I'm going to work with people that are with individual souls that, are trying to learn that stuff. But there's so many different, we live in an illusion, right? And every one of these different fields of creation is an illusion. Well, this is just a very small number. There are I wouldn't even, I don't know enough to guess how many, but there are millions of these different illusions that you can choose to go live in and experience. And that experience will be very different than this experience. So you'll do some of those somewhere along the line. So yeah, there's other places that you can go and you decide. And the more you evolve, so what we're doing, we've picked a very difficult way to evolve. And what we're doing is we've picked one of the most difficult challenges that you could possibly have by coming here. And we did that so we would evolve faster. This is supposed to be a fast track, because the more evolved you are, the more interesting things get and the more opportunities that you have to go experience other things. So we've chosen this very difficult path in order to evolve faster and so that we can experience other things.
So we have to be pretty evolved to begin with to choose this.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. We're more evolved than most of the angels, because the angels, they're looking at this and they're helping us. And they're saying, I'm not sure I want to dip my toe into that fine mess down there. I think I'll just sit here and watch it for a while. Now, the archangels are a little bit different because they've already had sentient experiences like this, and they're, and they're more advanced, and but they're here to help us. But yeah, you're right. We are far greater than we can ever possibly imagine when we think about our soul, and we're just, all we see is this tiny little piece of our soul.
I hate to stop it, but I have to stop it. Will this is such a huge book and far-ranging and complicated in many ways, but enlightening. Would you tell everybody where they can get hold of your book and
Okay.
what you have
The,
coming up?
the book is Our Eternal Existence. It's a metaphysical perspective of reality. And it's just been released on December 1st here in the United States and over most of the world, December 1st of 2023. And you can get it on Amazon. You can go to my website, which is davidgaggin.com. And it's David, and it's Gaggin, Gaggin.com. So you can go there and you can, and there's a place that it says buy the book, and you can just click on that. It'll take you right to the book. Also, has my website has all my old radio shows on it that I used to do, and you can also buy my first book, The Endless Journey, and that's on there as well. You can get it at Barnes and Noble. You can get it in a number of places. Amazon's probably the easiest and fastest and quickest way to get it. But again, it's Our Eternal Existence, a Metaphysical Perspective of Reality by David Gaggin, Gaggin. And I would encourage people to read it. I think you'll really enjoy it. It's a type of book. I've had a number of people read it. They gave me great reviews, and they said, I just finished it, 5 out of 5. I'm going to start reading it again, because you have to. I put so much in the book. I tried to explain to people how all this stuff works and what's important in life. So I start out with the universe and how where it came from and what it's all about, and my work right through to how to live a better life. And there's a lot of stuff in the book. And if you read through it, what you can do is you really, that'll give you a broad perspective. But then go pick the areas that you're particularly interested in, because you'll find out a whole bunch of that in that area. It's really a spiritual reference book is what it is.
You'll have to get the book to find out how to live a better life, because we didn't get to that part.
We did not get there.
Right. Thank you so much for being on. I've really enjoyed our conversation.
Thank you, Barb. I enjoyed it too.
Great. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Hi. That was at the end of the live show, but Dave and I continued for quite a bit. So stick with us. There's more. Okay. So now that part is over.
Yeah. Okay.
And I hope I didn't bring you all over the place, but it was just curiosity to curiosity.
I didn't have any problem with it at all. I noticed you stayed away from my questions, but that's all right. I didn't need those questions. Whatever you want to talk about is good with me. So.
Well, yeah, I just go with what I'm interested in, and I just assume everybody else is too.
And they probably are. That's probably the best way to do it. Yeah. Right.
Right. And then some of the questions, like the one that I kind of touched on, but then we reflected off, was because I'm a medium. And what I do, my thing is, I never go by looks, because they change their looks. There is ego over there. And I imitate them. Or their job is to give me something that the person sitting in front of me will know. And that
absolutely. And they know that. And so they'll do that. Because if they, they know that they're trying to convince that other person, not you, the other person that you're working with, who they're talking to. And so they'll tell them, and they'll tell you, and then you pass it on to them. But yeah.
The weird thing is a lot of people want these huge words of wisdom, and they don't have them. They can now see your life and understand it, but the emotion, they step back from the emotion, that comes off a little bit. But mostly they just want to be seen and heard, and you to know that they're there.
Exactly. They're trying to let you know that they're okay. That they're okay, and you're going to be okay. Everybody's okay. And
they do come and visit. That's the other thing they want you to know. They do come and visit. Yeah.
Without a doubt. They're and you go on a trip, They could be on the plane with you or just meet you there when they,
Right. I've
they
seen quite a
visit.
number backseat drivers actually. You know. But one
Yeah,
thing
yeah.
I have questioned, and nobody else ever does, but how do I know the telepathy? How do I know I'm picking it up from the spirit and not from the person sitting in front of me? Because it is
Well,
telepathy, you know?
it is telepathy. And
Hmm.
but the person in front of you is not going to be thinking the information that you
Right.
come up with. They're going to be, who knows, they'll be thinking of whatever, but the person that you're getting the information from will be, well, it'll be a totally different subject than
Hmm. That's
what
true. Yeah, that's true.
you know
That's a good
so,
way to
so
look at it.
yeah, yeah, they just pop up and they want to tell you things that they want you to know. And the people, you know you might convince them through certain things, but then the other information that the deceased wants the person to know, the person doesn't know that stuff. So
Hmm.
it's new material. It's absolutely new
Yeah.
material.
Yeah.
I know my daughter, she's able to do automatic writing, and she was taught to do automatic writing by the first medium that she and my oldest daughter went to after my wife died.
Hmm.
And so she's, and there was like 6 women, being taught this. And my youngest daughter, was the only one that was able to do it. And
Yeah.
she said, so she's writing and she's in a trance and she doesn't know what she's writing. She's just writing away. So
Hmm.
then the medium said, your mother was standing between the two of you the whole time you were doing this. And they said, well, we didn't know that. And then they go back and get out in the car, and my oldest daughter's driving. She says, why don't you read what you wrote? And one of the things she said, the first thing she says, I'm standing right next to you.
Oh,
So,
wow. Yeah.
it's,
Hmm. And
and then
isn't
I've
that a
asked,
comforting thought, you know?
oh, absolutely. And then I
Yeah.
had, I asked, I was selling my house up in Massachusetts, and I had a leak in the ceiling up there, and I couldn't find it to save my life. So I
Mhm.
said to Chris, go ask your mother where the leak is, please. So
Yeah.
she goes and comes back. She says, Mom says it's between the fireplace and the wet bar right above it. So I go back up on the roof and I look, and there's this hairline crack that I never saw before.
Wow.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
so I mean, it's not hard
Hmm.
to convince yourself that the
Yeah.
spirit world is very, very live and very able and willing to help you. And what my wife said, my kids talk to her all the time, and especially about the grandkids and such. And
Hmm.
my wife has told them that it helps her to be able to help them. It helps her to evolve in the
Oh, it
astral
does.
plane, that
Yeah.
by helping, by interfacing and helping us. So it's interesting.
Hmm.
The
I've
whole
seen
stuff is interesting.
spirits who almost take on the job to help, um, people here, almost like angels in a way, but not angels.
Right.
Let's say you'll have somebody who experienced being a drug addict, and then, they go over to the other side. Well, they wanted that experience so they could assist people who were going through it
I mean,
and
that's very
understand
true.
it.
And that's a more advanced individual than probably the person going through the drugs, down here.
Hmm.
Somebody
Right.
that would
Right.
choose that path is
Hmm.
probably one of the more advanced souls that would create a personality that would do that.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's pretty interesting. Then you get the one who says, "What happened to my rose bushes?" I had that happen where they wanted to talk to their mother, and finally I kept saying, "What's with the roses? What?" And they had no idea. And it turned out they had sold their aunt's house and loved her roses. Somebody else bought it, and they pulled out all the rose bushes. And that's what she was here about. Not
Gee,
only that, she was haunting the kid. And I said, you can't be doing this because she's so upset about her roses.
Yeah.
But
Well,
that was
we're
kind of an
still
interesting
we're
one.
still who we are. We have a broader
Yeah,
view when we die, but we're still who we are. And what's
yeah.
interesting with the survival personality is when we die, and our personality, our ego becomes is not as dominant, so it goes into
Mm,
the soul. But when you want to go talk to that person, the soul reorganizes itself
yeah.
and puts that ego up front to do the talking.
Hmm. So that you can recognize them. I've seen
Oh
that.
yeah, you
It's
never
like they
you
will present as you knew them. So you will
absolutely, and
recognize them. Yeah.
you never lose that. You become more of a team member and such like
Hmm.
that. You're supporting this thing, but we have a web personality and we have an individual personality. And what we're
Right.
trying to do
Right.
here is we're trying to learn about our individual, because most of the time we're in this web personality.
Hmm.
So,
I say to
you know,
people, you've heard that saying, you're a drop in the ocean. Well, somebody got that wrong. You're a drop and the ocean. You're both. You're individual and blended.
you are.
You're
That's
both.
exactly
Yeah.
right. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Somebody
Interesting
got that
stuff.
wrong or wrote it down wrong or something. Yeah. It's pretty
Right.
fascinating. It is pretty
Yeah.
fascinating. And I agree with you on when I've done past lives with people, I only look at the ones impacting this life.
Yeah. That's the one.
The rest of them, honestly, are kind of boring. I'm only looking
Yeah.
at the ones that impact this life. And that's all
Yeah.
that
And
really matters for this lifetime.
well, that's what the person has got to be interested in, because something is
Mhm.
bothering them most of the time, unless you're just researching for the sake of researching. Most of the time, you've got some issue that you're dealing with. I'm
Mhm.
sure you've read Brian Weiss, Many Lives, Many Masters, and
Mhm.
maybe
Yeah.
yeah, and and he had, I believe the woman's name was Catherine, that had all of these issues that she was dealing with, and he thought, well, I wonder if there was a childhood issue here. Well, there wasn't a childhood issue. He went back to many
Right.
lives back, and he'd keep
Yeah.
hitting the thing, and then she would bring that into the present, and she would view it differently. And what she really was doing was changing her past, because our past is
Mhm.
only our memory, right? It's not what really
Yeah.
happened, because nobody remembers it, right? And so what she was doing, she was changing her past that changed the present. Fascinating
Mhm.
stuff. You can change the past. Ah,
Yeah. Well, you know what?
interesting.
When somebody's gotten stuck, like that at that moment of death, this is what I see. At that moment of death, they turn and look at their lives. And if they judge, they can get stuck right there. Normally, it's neutral. They see it, they understand it, they feel it, but the judgment is what'll kill you. And if they
Well,
judge, they can get stuck. And some of them, I have to go back, and in that moment of turning around, I have to show them the good stuff, that they have
mm,
judged the negative,
yeah,
and I have to show them the good stuff, and then they can release. It's kind of
right.
fascinating. It's kind of
It is.
fascinating.
It is.
Yeah.
Good stuff. Thanks, Barb. Take care.
You too. Bye bye.
Okay. Bye bye.